You don't think threats are a major
People
part of the Torah?
who got into that
So it's just consequences.
in the bizarre sexual perversity of Baal Peor. I'm sure you have an appropriate set of initials for this. But if you read the Midrashim of what they describe, and they all died. They all died. I mean, that's what happened. I don't know that it's a threat. But anyway, go on.
Purpose of Jewish law, chapter 4, verse 6, is to look wise to the Goyim. So when the Goyim see the way Orthodox Jews observe the Torah today, are they saying, oh, what a wise people? Or they think, what a crazy people? So most people today can't figure out what Jewish law is. There's like this agreement between those who observe Jewish laws and those who don't observe Jewish laws. There's one thing they both agree on, and that is that there's no reason for Jewish laws, except God said so for the traditional believer.
Well, I'm not sure that, the problem is the translation and the textual reading. I'm not sure that that's what's being said.
You don't think the purpose of Jewish law is to look wise to the Goyim?
No. I think it's...
Surely a wise and discerning people is this great nation?
He's saying this is what happened. This is what happens, or this is what happened. That's not the reason for Jewish law.
Well, let me have
you
a
will
look
be
at
wise. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in the Gemara and stuff also.
For it is you shall Okay, well, as God spoke in English, Moses said, "You shall safeguard and perform these laws, for it is your wisdom and discernment in the eyes of the Goyim. They shall hear of all these chokim, not the mishpatim, the chokim, the supposedly non-rational laws. And they shall hear of these chokim and say, surely a wise and discerning people is this great nation."
We don't say that about Buddhist meditative practice? I mean, we talked about this already. I mean, chukim are the vehicle to enlightenment.
Right,
I don't think that people celebrate religious things on the basis of rationality. But anyway, the Gemara talks about this and has all kinds of other explanations.
Whole purpose of Jewish law is to be performed in the land of Israel, Eretz Israel.
Yes, that's an interesting point.
We're supposed to stay close to Torah scholars. When the Torah says cleave to Hashem or stay close to God, how do we do that? We do that the way I'm doing things right now, the way I'm rolling right now in the hood, staying close to Torah scholars. I'm supporting a Torah scholar. I'm providing him with Diet Coke.
That's right.
That's the way. Really that's the way a humble person such as myself, who can't really read Hebrew, that's the way I still get to cling to Hashem,
of course, if you
by providing the true Torah scholar with Diet Coke.
But if you really wanted to get
I give you caffeine.
You need the caffeine one. Yeah.
Chapter 4, verse 15. God does not take human form. Well, if God can do anything, why can't He take human form? Why can't He become a man from Nazareth named Joshua and walk among the people and perform miracles and die on a cross? If God can do anything, why can't He do that?
Why would He?
What's so wrong with images? Why do they lead to corruption? Why do they lead to breaking the covenant?
You should be an expert on that one. You tell me why.
Yeah, someone told me avodah zorah, idol worship in the land then was like what porn is now.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Somebody did say that, didn't they?
Yeah, that's right. Some very wise man in the chat room said that. Is it okay for the Goyim to worship the sun, moon, and stars?
Oh, I didn't. Oh.
Chapter 4, verse 19.
You do know who said that, right?
Yeah. Does Jewish success depend on our performance of the commandments? If God had given Israel an easier path, they would not have accepted the Torah. End of days, when are they coming? You have to seek God.
I happen to know the inside information on that one.
Yeah, what's the esoteric knowledge?
You have to like
give you
get the right BlackBerry.
$4,000, and we'll find out when the end of time is. So those are all my questions for this week's Parsha.
But it's interesting that you use that phrase, the end of time. I mean, some other time we could talk about, and I've written about this, but the end of time, according to many of the mystics in particular, is literally the end of time. Like, in the end of time, there won't be time, which is an interesting thing to contemplate. But that's not what we're talking about today. So let's talk about. Obviously, we're not going to talk about all those things because Otherwise, we'll be on the chat all night. Now, there's really interesting stuff to say about that, and let's not forget that there's also there's some talk about tshuva here, and you have the Ten Commandments. Yeah, there's a lot of fun stuff in this week's parsha. Certainly, after Vayikra, community rabbis can breathe a sigh of relief with the next few parashot. So, on the other hand, it makes it harder to know where to start. So let's start right from the beginning. Oh, I wanted to quote you something. So there's the line here about Vikashna Mishamat Hashem Elokecha. Now I found it, now I lost it again.
That you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart?
No, that you'll find, and in this rough situation here, I found it again. In this rough situation that he describes, when he says that if the Jews worship idols, they will be scattered and they will be chased into exile, and all sorts of horrible things will happen. It says in, you want the English? It says in the Hebrew, you will find God if you look with all your heart and all your... From there you will seek Hashem, your God, and you will find Him if you search for Him with all your heart and all your soul. So, it's a great line, and it's something that we discussed before, but I think it's like one of those zingers from the Baal Shem Tov. It says, in the name of the Baal Shem Tov, said, "V'vikashta misham." There, in that place that you are, that's where you're going to find it. Now, if this were in a Zen place, there'd be a gun that goes off at that point in time. There, where you, in that place where you are, in the generation that you are, in the state and existential state, that's what the there is. The there is the there in your heart at that point in time, in your situation, where you are. That's where you're meant to find Hashem. That's where you will find Him. It's a concept very strong, and we'll see over and over again in the Hasidic literature of the reality of human suffering and human tragedy.
Yeah.
But it becomes the central point. I mean, that's why we live.
Yeah.
So, anybody
worry,
reach enlightenment as a result of that?
I've got it monitored, so I don't want to detract you from your train of thought.
That's a great assumption on your part. There is a train of thought. So what I want to do is let's go back and talk a little. Let's tie a lot of this up together and talk about certain things about prayer, failure, etc.
Sounds good.
So this is like the central source for lots of texts about prayer. And the Midrash here says there are 10 languages of prayer derived from this.
Yes. Prayer is called by 10 names according to Chabad.org. Cry, howl, groan, song, encounter, stricture, prostration, judgment, and beseeching.
Yeah, if we had worked this out better, we could probably do a live version of all of those. But you know what the interesting thing is? It's pointed out. What's missing in those 10 names of prayer?
Gratitude?
No, prayer.
Oh. Okay.
So Hasidic writers say that is a. It's not. Those lessons aren't. Those aren't prayer. Those are the route to prayer. Those are cry, howl, groan, encounter. All of those things are the ways to come to prayer. Maybe we can tie it into that first teaching about Bikashta Misham. They're a way to come to prayer. Many of the Hasidic writers say that prayer is not actually possible. Here's your incarnation of God. See, Jews don't need that form of it, because many would argue that. So they say, what happens when you come to that point?